what strikes me most is a lack of surprise in the report. I think we've known all along that it was not going to be a Poirot moment where a murderer would be revealed, and in fact all the suspects were carrying the knife.
Fire in someone's home could burn down a whole house with such devastating effects.
So there was a very small fire to start off with in the first sort of initial minutes, and then after that it just spread severely from side to side upwards, and people were then starting to appear at the windows frantically, banging on the windows, screaming.
But right now people want answers, and it's absolutely right. And that's why I am today ordering a full public inquiry into this disaster. We need to know what happened. We need to have an explanation of this. We owe that to the families, to the people who have lost loved ones, friends, and the homes in which they lived.
Mehdi El-Wahabi, Noor Huda El-Wahabi, Logan Gomez,
The simple truth is that the deaths that occurred were all avoidable, and those who lived in the tower were badly failed over a number of years and in a number of different ways by those who were responsible for ensuring the safety of the building.
I mean, the first thing I'm deeply impressed by going through the report is how straightforward it is, how easy to read it is. In other words, it's not drowning in jargon and gobbledygook. It's written so that people can read it and understand it. It's really important that people can read this, that it's not regarded as just some specialist domain. Having said that, I think a whole bunch of themes emerge from it. One of them is everywhere there's a chronic lack of training. So everybody seems to be incompetent at what they're doing, pretty basically, whether it's in the fire brigade, whether it's in Kensington and Chelsea, whether it's in all of these different bodies that are supposed to certify the safety of building materials. The first minute there's a financial crunch, training goes out the window, right? As a country, I would have to say we don't invest very much in training. We don't believe in it very much. And really, regrettably, in the last couple of years, and understandably due to the pandemic, a lot of it has been turned into kind of banal tick box PowerPoint presentations that people do on their own.
And I want you to join me once again as we started and tell them, shame, shame, shame on you! Shame, shame!
Another theme that comes out is the degree to which all of these so-called standard bodies are deeply corrupt, in the sense that they would rather please their customers, who are the people whose products they're supposed to be assessing, than actually do their job. So they've completely lost sight of who they're working for. So what's clear is that all of the people in this kind of very densely knit network of companies is thinking, don't piss off the customer because we want the money, right? We want the profits, we want the bonuses, and so on. We don't think anything matters unless you can measure it, and the best measure is always money. So, and the other thing, which I remember very well from some of the broadcast parts of the first part of the inquiry, is so many decisions were passed down to very junior people who were alert to the pressure they were under, often felt themselves to be inadequate to the work they were being asked to do, but of course were terrified by the prospect of losing their jobs. So they just said what they knew their bosses wanted to hear. So I think when you put all these themes together, what you see is a completely exaggerated, out of control belief that you can just keep cutting people, training, expertise, and so on forever. That efficiency is the only thing that matters. So get it done fast, get it done cheaply. Nothing else counts. A complete failure even to imagine for a second that something might go wrong, and therefore contingencies are needed. And a real belief that, well, if you subcontract and subcontract, then everybody will have to compete on price and will get the job done cheaper, better, faster. So these are kind of fundamental ingrained attitudes to how business is done that have proved lethal. And I see them in many, many of the cases that I have studied of willful blindness, but these themes are always there.
I want to start with an apology on behalf of the British state to each and every one of you, and indeed to all of the families affected by this tragedy. It should never have happened.
This idea of willful blindness, it's such an interesting one, and it's one we can all relate to in any sort of workplace situation, or any, even socially. When it's everyone's problem, yes, it becomes no one's problem. And that's fundamentally the issue here, and unfortunately it caused the tragedy in this case. But are you worried that this is just a systematic thing throughout all of government, private business, corporations, councils, all the way through? This kind of thing is probably going to happen again unless, drastic action is taken.
I think it requires two things. I definitely think it requires drastic action. I think, for example, yesterday when the Prime Minister suggested that, perhaps some of these companies shouldn't be allowed to deal in public contracts, I thought, you think probably. And I also thought, not just public contracts, any contracts. I don't want these people deciding the standards for private developments of houses, for example. These are not capable, competent people, and they should never be in decision-making roles again, for starters, never mind whatever the criminal justice system makes of them. So I think we have to, be pretty hard-nosed about that, because all of the things that we've seen in the past have been very long inquiries, lots of pontification, lots of public shaming, but no substantive action. So I think definitely, and the report is full of recommendations, practical recommendations, I think we have to move on that really quickly and determinedly and not stop until the job is done. But I also think that this is going to require a mindset shift, which is we have to understand that in very complex systems, which a building like Grenfell is, and doing a building like Grenfell is, efficiency cannot be your only guide, right? You need to spend more time, more money than is absolutely the cheapest you can get, because otherwise you are exacerbating the risk of the work that you're doing. And I think we have really fallen into a trap thinking that efficiency is the one gold standard by which all decisions should be made. Efficiency is how the pandemic planning office in the government got shut down, right? Efficiency goes by another word sometimes, otherwise known as austerity, which is why we have filthy rivers. It's why we have some of the worst housing stock in Europe. So I think we need a mindset shift about what do we really mean by good work, by good decisions. And it has to go back, not to the money, but to people's lives, because underneath the money is human life.
Yeah. And when you talk about that mindset shift, this pillar of capitalism, competition, we say it drives innovation. We say it drives prices down because of competing companies trying to make what they produce more efficient and things like that, is actually a bit of a myth in some ways, because what you say is it often creates fraud, it creates cheating, and it creates people taking the easy way out to get a cheap win. And it's systematic. We saw it with the post office scandal and things like that. The way it works in terms of making people who may not be bad people do things that cause a lot of problems.
We've been sold this idea that competition makes everything better. It makes the best rise to the top. And I thought, but actually, in all the cases of willful blindness I've written about, competition has made things worse. It's a very distracting thing, competition, and it depends a lot on what you're competing for. And mostly, in almost all walks of life these days, we don't compete for quality, we don't compete for integrity, we don't compete for learning and growth, we compete for money. And it's very clear from all the psychological research that once people are thinking about money, they're really not thinking about anything else. So I think as a society, we have to think pretty deeply about, beyond money, what are our values? What do we care about? Do we want to be the richest country on earth, or would we like to be the safest country on earth? Would we like to be a country that has the most cohesive society where people look after each other? Or do we want to continue in the dog-eat-dog vein that we've been in for a couple of decades where everybody's just trying to outdo the other and sees everybody as a rival instead of a neighbor.
People I met in the church today, and I've met every day over the last few days, are showing their resilience. They're showing a community coming together to grieve, but also a community frustrated and yes, angry. Angry not simply at the poor response in the days afterwards from the council and the government, but the years of neglect from the council and successive governments.